Welcome to our OSHA Focal Point series. I'm Dr. John Mulroy, Director of the Pennsylvania OSHA Consultation Program, housed in the world-renowned Safety Sciences Department here at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. These videos were created with the essential, need-to-know OSHA compliance information to supplement your safety and health training. Addressing OSHA's most frequently cited standards, like lockout-tagout, fall protection, hazard communication, and machine guarding, these videos can help your organization anticipate, identify, evaluate, and control workplace safety and health hazards. We hope these critical OSHA focal points assist you in preventing future injuries and illnesses. If you still have questions or you need no-cost OSHA compliance assistance, we're here to help. All you need to do is reach out to us at IUP using the link below and request this no-cost OSHA compliance assistance service. It's that easy. Thank you for choosing the Focal Points video series. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to be the first to know when new safety and health content is added to this channel. Have a safe day, everyone. Today's topic is confined spaces in construction. The purpose of today's topic is to provide you with the essential need-to-know information about the hazards associated with confined spaces on a construction site. During this short presentation, we will briefly discuss the following topics, which include: what is a confined space? What is a permit-required confined space? What are the common hazards associated with a permit space on a construction site? And how can you protect yourself while working in a permit space? So, confined spaces in construction. The purpose of the standard is to protect employees engaged in construction activities. And it's important to remember that this confined space standard for construction does not apply to any excavations or trenching or shoring operations, to tunnels, shafts, caissons, or cofferdams, or any diving operations. When Subpart AA and another OSHA standard apply, the employer must in fact comply with both. So what is a confined space? It's a space that's large enough and so configured that an employee can bodily enter it. It has limited or restricted means for entry and exit, and it is not designed for continuous employee occupancy. It's important to remember, in order to be a confined space, it must have all three of these. Here are some examples of a confined space on a construction site: bins, boilers and pits, manholes, tanks, incinerators, transformer vaults, drilled shafts, turbines, silos. So what is a permit-required confined space? Well, a permit-required confined space is in fact a confined space that contains one or more of the following: has a hazardous atmosphere or potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere, and/or has a material that has the potential for engulfing an entrant, and/or an internal configuration such that an entrant could be trapped or asphyxiated by inwardly converging walls or by a floor which slopes downward and tapers to a smaller cross-section. Lastly, any other recognized serious safety or health hazard. Now, there's differences between the construction standard and the general industry standard. These differences include that a competent person must conduct a worksite evaluation on a construction site. Employers using any alternate entry procedures must prevent physical hazard exposures through either elimination or isolation. And permits may be suspended instead of canceled, provided that the space is returned to permit conditions prior to re-entry. Continuous monitoring of atmospheric and engulfment hazards is required on a construction site. Employers relying on a local emergency service for rescue must make arrangements for responders to notify them in advance if those responders are no longer available. Specific information exchange must occur on a multi-employer work site. So who's who in a confined space on a construction site? We have a host employer, we have a controlling contractor, we have an entry employer, an entry supervisor, we have the competent person, an attendant, an authorized entrant, and of course, emergency rescue personnel. All these people have specific job responsibilities under the confined space standard. So before any work begins at a confined space, each employer on that construction site must ensure that a competent person identifies and evaluates all confined and permit-required confined spaces. This competent person, who is it? It's anyone capable of identifying existing and predictable hazards in the surroundings that are unsanitary, hazardous, or dangerous to workers. They also identify all the confined spaces in which employees may enter, and they identify each space that is in fact a permit space, which includes an evaluation of all hazards present. They reevaluate and reclassify a space when necessary. So if a construction site contains one or more permit spaces, the employer must inform all exposed employees of the existence of that permit space, where it's located, and post a danger sign. They also must inform employees' authorized representatives and the controlling contractor in a timely manner, in any other manner if they choose that's other than posting, and the existence and location and the danger posed by each specific permit space. Other general requirements include that the employer must effectively prevent any unauthorized employees from entering that permit space. In the written program that covers confined spaces, each entry employer must have a specific permit space program implemented at that construction site, and that written program must be made available prior to and during entry operations for inspection by any employee who requests it. So what are the physical hazards you may encounter in a confined space? This includes mechanical, electrical, hydraulic, pneumatic, radiation and noise, thermal temperature extremes, explosives, engulfment, inwardly converging walls, and falls. Physical hazards also include chemicals that can cause death or serious physical damage through skin or eye contact. When we reclassify a permit space, only a competent person can make that determination on a construction site. When we reclassify, the space can contain no actual or potential hazardous atmosphere. An elimination of the hazard must be performed without entering the confined space. We must document the reasons why the space is being reclassified. And lastly, employees must exit and return to a permit space classification if any of the noted hazards arise. How do we evaluate a permit-required confined space on a construction site? Before entry, we test conditions in the permit space before changing the space's natural ventilation. There are exceptions to this case. If isolation of the space is infeasible because it is too large or part of a continuous system, then we must perform pre-entry testing, continuously monitor entry conditions in the area where entrants are working, and provide an early warning system that continuously monitors for non-isolated engulfment hazards. We will continuously monitor those atmospheric hazards unless the equipment is not commercially available, specific to that hazard, or periodic monitoring is deemed sufficient to ensure the hazards are maintained at a safe level. If continuous monitoring is not used, periodic monitoring is required with sufficient frequency to ensure acceptable entry conditions are maintained throughout the entry. So how do we test for atmospheric hazards? We're testing for oxygen, combustible gases and vapors, and toxic gases and vapors, and we test in that order. We're going to issue a permit before entry, and the employer must prepare that permit, have an entry supervisor sign the entry permit to authorize it, and ensure that the completed permit is available to any entrant in that confined space. The permit should be posted at the entry portal or through some other effective means to communicate the hazards associated with that permit space. And remember, the duration of the permit cannot exceed the time required to complete the task or the job identified on the permit. So employers must provide training for their workers to ensure they possess the understanding and the knowledge and the skills to safely perform any assigned duties inside of a permit space. The training needs to result in an understanding of the hazards and the methods used to isolate, control, and to protect the entrance. And the training instructs all unauthorized employees in the dangers of attempting rescue. Training must be provided before the employee is assigned duties, before a change in any assigned duties is given, whenever there is a change that presents a brand new hazard in that space, and whenever there is evidence that a deviation from the permit space entry procedures has occurred. Let's discuss non-entry rescue. Non-entry rescue is required unless the retrieval equipment would increase the overall risk of entry or would not contribute to rescuing the entrant himself. Whenever non-entry rescue is selected, the entry employer must ensure that the retrieval system or the methods are used and confirm prior to entry that emergency assistance would be available in the event that non-entry rescue fails. If entry rescue is selected, the employer must designate an on-site entry rescue team. Non-entry retrieval systems include a full body harness for the quick and safe removal of an entrant, a retrieval line attached to the center back near the shoulders and above the head of the entrant, and a mechanical device attached to a fixed point outside the space. Employees have a right to participate in a written confined space program. Employers must consult with all affected employees and their authorized representatives on the development and the implementation of a permit space program, or make available to each affected employee or his or her authorized representative any information associated with the confined space program. To get more help with confined spaces on a construction site, go to OSHA.gov. Thank you.